Okay, hello. I have to be a little bit quick. I've tried to make a video all day, but family stuff, and now I'm in the bedroom. I'm going out to a speakers dinner this evening, so okay. Let me just do a second round of Overmind components. What we can see here is, yeah. So first of all, the initial proof of concept didn't really work. And the reason is that I used Snabdom Thunk, which is like what Elm uses. Elm is based on Snabdom, and it uses Thunk for the lazy view thingy. But it's basically a memoization function, and that's not enough to do the tracking and stuff. But and I had a really hard time debugging this because I tried to refactor the DevTools client of Overmind, and I got weird errors, and it was actually quite frustrating. I almost even gave it up. But then I thought, why don't I just copy the thunk and then go in there and convert that thunk into like a component concept. So I did that, and then it immediately worked beautifully. So that's really nice. So what we have here is the same sandbox, though I made some changes here. Just have some silly state, a list, a couple of actions, and then we have a list item component, and we have my app here. So if we look into the DOM structure here, we can see that we have my app with h1, and then we have a list item with a foo here. And this was a really surprising benefit of having this self element representing the component, is that when I was I'm working on the DevTools refactor now, but there was something wrong with the styling. And what I did is that I just used the element selector. I clicked the element that was the problem, and it was the component. So I could immediately resonate where to go in my code to figure that out. And that was like a surprising benefit, but the reason I'm going down this path at all is to see where can we improve the developer experience. And that was certainly an improvement, but an unexpected improvement. So anyways, here we are. We have our component. It doesn't receive any props, but we're using what is now called the store and actions. So the store is the Overmind state. And as we can see, we can change the bar here. And then we iterate the list where we pass in the item ID as a key and then the item itself. And then we have the item here, which we show the title, and then we can change that title. So when I click that, we see that it updates to bar. So the really nice thing now is that we are actually passing in state here. And if we look at the components list in the DevTools, we see that we have my app, which is looking at foo, list, the first item in the list, and the ID, because that's used on the key. And then we have the list item, which is only looking at this specific title. So when we change the title now, and there was only one component that was affected by that, and that was the list item, as we can see here. And this just works. You don't have to think about this. And this is also the developer experience improvement I'm going for, is that you understand the reconciliation boundaries or render boundaries. And the render boundary is the components themselves, which means that when you have a component where nothing changes, it will not reconcile. So for example, if I change, let's see, let me console rendering. This is a little trick. So now it says refresh here now. It says rendering. When I change bar, nothing happens. So even though it reconciles my app because it changes bar, it does not render the list item. But when I click the list item, it renders again. And this is just because you can understand this. Like, you're looking at your code, you're seeing that there's no change, and of course there's no change. And one thing is that it's more optimal in terms of reconciliation, but that's not the most important part. The most important part is just understanding what your code does. And that's what I think it's the biggest problem with React, is that you don't understand what's happening. You don't understand what the state change, what it does to all the components. So arguing that by default they should memorize all the components and stuff, it's not only because of performance or predictable performance, but it's also to be better able to understand what actually happens when you render components. Okay, so that's one thing. Another thing I did is that I added a concept of, let's see, test. So we can have self hello, and then we can have an onMount thing here. Function mounted, and then we can add that thing here, test. Let's save that. Yeah, we can close the DevTools now. So here we can see that it mounted. And what we're going to do is do a check here. So if store foo equals bar, then we show the test, or we show nothing. And then instead of having an onMount thing, you can actually return a function instead. So this is inspired by hooks. And I think that's the most appealing thing about hooks, especially the use effect hook, is that you have one function that shows you what happens when you mount the component, and then you return a function for what you want to do when you unmount the component, which is typically registering listeners and stuff. So if I do unmount here now, so we see it, and now it says unmount. So what you would typically do here is you would register some event listener or something, and then you would unregister it when you return. And I'm thinking this could maybe be used for other things as well. So for example, I showed the onEnter, onLeave transition system. Maybe it should just be called transition. And then the function is when the element enters, and then you return a function for what you want to do when the element is removed. I think that might be a better pattern. But anyways, I wanted to show that. And then I wanted to show, yes, I did some refactoring on the DevTools. And as I said initially, there's this thing about having state in components. Like, how can you go without it? Which Elm does. And I still don't understand how you can build an application and like have a component system and stuff without having state inside the components. So what I did here is that I'm allowing you to actually define state in a component as simple as, for example, we just want a string, and then we say state here instead. And if we want to, I can say the title just so it's different. And then you also get change state. So here we have change state instead. Take the state and we add like a exclamation mark. And as you can see, this just works. So I don't see how you can have a view layer without like component state. What I really like about this solution, it's so simple to express it. Every component gets a chance to have some state, and that's basically defined by you just giving it a default state. And then when you change it, that will become the new state that is passed into the component. Sorry, I'm going a bit fast here, but yeah, I just wanted to get through these concepts. So I'm really happy to say that I don't have the DevTools refactor here, or I could show you, but like there's like the state of the state overview in the DevTools is an insanely complex DOM structure with tons of components, like recursive components, and it just works now. So I'm not at all worried about SnapDOM acting as it should, related to having a component concept like this. This state thing was like I coded it in like without testing it. It took me like 2 minutes to implement that, and it just worked to my surprise. Which basically means that it's a concept that I have control over now. And then the question becomes like, is this a good way to handle UI? Yes. So these are the things I wanted to show you. One thing was that you have the component in the DOM structure, which makes it so much easier to do styling, especially when something is wrong. You have this concept of hooks, which uses the hooks pattern, where you have a function and you return a function to do the inverse. So basically what you could do here, you could have like reaction, and then you could say reaction, something like that. You look at some state and then you do something. And since this returns an unsubscribe, that would unsubscribe when the component unmounts, which is pretty cool. Yes. So what I'm doing now, I'll just keep using this as I'm refactoring the DevTools, because it's a really complex application. As you can see, I had almost immediately problems when I took the proof of concept into the DevTools. But yeah, really happy about how it's moving along, and as soon as the DevTools is working with everything, I would say that this is something that will work. But already this should be possible to test, so I will bring it into the next branch and document it a little bit so that you can test it. So I'll let you know when that's done. Okay, I have to go now, so talk to you later.